we have talked somewhat so far about, in our talks, in the videos, it's mentioned in a little bit, we're gonna talk more about it today, about the odds of something happening, probabilities or chances. So, this way, have you ever studied probability or odds in a math class? Okay, give me an idea of just one little thing that you remember learning in a math class about the probability of something. Doesn't matter what.
Like 4 or 5 times this is gonna happen.
Yeah, absolutely. You studied it before, I would imagine. I would imagine you have because it's done a lot in math classes today, and it's important. So, we have seen such things as the odds of accidentally generating a text. Well, we didn't talk about this one. Of Genesis 1:1. In other words, if we took all the letters in the alphabet and then tried to randomly, accidentally pick the letters in a row and the spaces in a row for in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, to get it to come out first time, the odds would be 1 in 26 to the 44th power. We're going to talk about what that means, okay? But the reason why it's 26 is because there's 26 letters in the alphabet plus, well, that doesn't even take into account the spaces. 26 letters in the alphabet, and there's 44 letters in there, so it'd be 26 to the 44th power. So we figured that. Or it has been calculated by some that the probability of an eye forming by accident is 1 in 10 to the 266th power. Okay? We're going to find out what that means. The chances of a simple integrated system composed of 200 integrated parts. What's an integrated system? It's the same as what we talked about in previous weeks of the irreducibly complex system. So it'd be like a mousetrap or something like that, only with like 200 parts. Why did they choose 200 parts? Just to show how big it is, number one. And number two, anything that is a integrated system in our body, anything that's irreducibly complex in our body, actually has quite a few parts. 200 would be rather reasonable to come up with. All right? And that is an astronomical one of 1 in 10 to the 375th. What does all that mean? All right, so let's go back to some basics that you probably already studied in school. First of all, what are the odds of flipping heads with a coin?
1, 2.
1 in 2. Why? Because there's only 2 sides. Okay, so we can write it as 1 over 2 as a fraction, 1 in 2, or 1 colon 2, or simply say 1 in 2. So if we flip this, we got what's known that in another sense that we got a 50-50 chance of getting what we want. But what about picking the number 3 with, or rolling a number 3 with 1 dice?
So 1 and 6.
Okay, why?
6 different sides.
6 different sides, and each one's numbered from 1 to 6. Okay, so if I roll that, I got a 3. Well, that's probably not going to happen every time, is it? That time I got a 6, that time I got a 5. But 1 out of every 6 tries, if I do it long enough, would come up with each one of the numbers. All right? What about picking a 10 of spades out of a deck of 52? And I counted, there's 52 in here. We're not putting the jacks in, and a couple other things that sometimes come with a card deck. This is just all the suits. 52. All right, 1 in 52, 52 different cards, all right? And pulling a red cube or a blue cube or any other kind, say this is our red. If we had those in a bag, all right, mix them all up, they're all the same size, so you can't tell the difference. One of them isn't sticky, so you can't tell the difference. I did this experiment once where I had a group of junior high school students. Some of them were rolling dice, and some of them were flipping coins, and some of them were picking cards and spinning spinners. And I had one group of girls, there was like 2 or 3 girls in the group, and they were picking out blue, putting it back in, blue, putting it back in, blue. And I came and I looked at their stats and they had all blues. There wasn't anything else. I'm going, what are you doing wrong? Nothing. Why are you getting blue? We like blue. How are you making sure you get blue? We're looking inside. Okay, so you can cheat. It doesn't work if you cheat. All right? So if there's 5, it'd be 1 out of 5. What about rolling 2 dice and getting a specific number, like snake eyes? All right? What would be the odds if we roll 2 dice that we get 2 ones? There's a little bit more work to that. Not a lot, but a little bit more.
1 in 12.
Good guess, but no. Nope. The tendency that you would think was that since there's 6 on this one, there's 6 on this one, that you take 6 plus 6 and you get 12. But if we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different ways to do this one, but each one of those, in other words, this one has 6 different ways on this one, and this one has 6 different ways on this one, and this one has 6 different ways on this one, what do we do instead of add to find out the total? We multiply. So to get snake eyes, that would be 1 out of 36. Okay, so the odds go up quite a little bit. Now, on the other hand, they always say, lucky 7. Why do they say lucky 7? Because 7 has the most possibilities with 2 dice, because there's several combinations. You can get a 3 with this dice and a 4 with that dice, or you can get a 4 with this dice and a 3 with this dice. Whoops, that's not 4. Where's the 4? Okay, that's 2. Or you can get a 1 and a 5, a 1 and a 6, or a 6 and a 1. That's 4. Or you can get a 2 and a 5 or a 5 and a 2. That's 6. That's the most number of possibilities that you can get with a specific number with 2 dice. So your best chances of getting a number that you choose by rolling 2 dice is by saying you want a 7, because you got 6 different ways out of 36. All right? That's why they always say, lucky 7, because you got a higher likelihood of getting it. All the other ones have less likelihood. And I was going to say something else, I forgot. Doesn't matter. Oh yeah. So it's 1 over 6 times 1 over 6 equals 1 over 36. 1/36 is for getting a 2 or a 12. But if you are to get a 7, you have 6 over 36, which reduces to 1/6, which is basically the same odds as rolling 1 dice and getting a number. So it's better odds. What about the possibility of flipping a coin and getting 20 heads in a row? How would we figure that? It would be 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2, 20 times. Which would be the same as taking our bottom number and raising it to the 20th power. Okay? So, I brought my handy dandy calculator here, my cell phone. So on this particular calculator, I didn't bring the right one. This one doesn't have that function. Oh, there it is. So I'm going to take 2, and I'm going to push this little up caret, which means the power of 20 equals 1,048,576, which is close to 1 in a million chance of getting 20 heads in a row, flipping it. Okay? Yes. Heads. Heads. I'm not very good at flipping today. I'm getting too old to do this. Maybe I should buy a lottery ticket.
Heads.
Huh. What do you start suspecting?
Heads.
Rigged.
This is a two-headed coin. Okay? When I was doing this back when I taught school years and years ago, there was one young guy who was rather ingenious, and he said, "Would you like to rig it?" I said, "Yeah." So he went home and he cut the tails off of two coins and I glued them together. See? So, yeah, it's 1 in a million chance, and if I was to do this 20 times, I would get 20. So what that tells you is, at that point, it's quite likely, it's one of my favorite things I've ever had. So I always take care of it. It's quite likely that if you get that, you're either really, really lucky, or you did something that you shouldn't, right? This, what we just put on the board, is what you do when you try to figure the odds of flipping 20 heads. We just did that. It's approximately 1 in a million chance to get that, all right? So what I want to do here, real quick, is a little experiment where now we're going to try to figure out who wants the cards. You're going to pick a card, shuffle and pick a card. Okay, and you're all going to get something, all right? Who wants to roll the dice? We're just going to do one. You wanna roll the dice? Who wants to flip a coin? Are you a flipper? And then somebody has to pull out without looking one of these. And then don't, Emily. That's not a big deal. People aren't even gonna know you're doing it. They can't see on camera. Huh? You can't look inside. So here's what we're gonna try to get. Okay, don't do it yet. We're gonna try to flip a heads. We're gonna try to, at the same time, we're gonna try to roll a 3. And then we're going to try to pick the ace of hearts. And then we're gonna try to pull the blue cube out of different colors. And we're gonna then figure the odds of what that is that we would get that. All right? So, and I can almost guarantee we won't, but not really, because when you see the odds, it's not as bad as you think it is. So, flip the coin, and we're gonna try to get a heads. What did you get? Go ahead, flip it.
Heads.
You got, okay, we're on our way. So, number 1, heads, check. Okay, what's the second one? Roll the dice. 5, no, that's not a check. Not a 3, so that's an X, so that didn't turn out to. What's the next one? Select the 8, don't look. Select by at random the ace of hearts. And you got 5, is it 5 or 10?
That's 10.
10 spades. That is a no. And then, pull a cube. We're trying to get which one?
Blue.
Trying to get blue. And you got pink. So we got pink.
Here's my-
So you can see that we failed on the first one because, first try, because all of these, we had to get all of them in order for it to work like we wanted, right? So what would be, how would we figure the odds now of all, and we did get all of those. What would be, what's the odds that we would actually get what we want? You got to go with what we already knew from the last few minutes here. What's the odds of getting ahead?
1, 2.
1 and 2. times, what's the odds in getting, a 3 or whatever on a dice? 6 times 1
52.
over 52 times 1 in 5. So if we take these denominators and we multiply them all together, that's what we would expect our chances would be. And here it is, all right? It would be 1 over 3,120, or approximately 1 in 3,000 chance. Way better odds than flipping that coin and getting 20 heads in a row. All right? In fact, these are the odds. It's like getting a hole in one if you are a PGA golfer. In other words, you're a professional golfer. Or that it's the same as the odds of your house burning down. Okay? Catching on fire. So, we just did this experiment. What if we were to take, there's twice as many of you guys, and there was 2 bags, and there were 2 coins being flipped and 2 dice, and what did you do? And have you do anything? We had 2 of everything. Okay? In other words, instead of having 5 things, we doubled it. We had. What would be the odds? Would it be 1 in 6,000? Not really. It would be 1 in 9,734,000. In other words, it would be really close to 1 in 10 million. Do you see how bringing up the number of possibilities, the number of events, lowers the possibility of those combined events happening by chance? Tremendously. Do you see that what I'm talking about? Yes? Yes? All right. And we write them this way. Notice that we wrote this one as 1 in 10 million, but we also wrote it as 1 in 10. This little caret means raised to the power of 7. And what that little power of 7 means on a 10, it means that 10, or that 1 has 7 zeros on it. And that would be 10 million. So, what's that? Scientific notation? Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what it is. It's just another way to write the numbers. So 1 in 10 to the 2 is 1 over 100, or 1 in 100. 3,000, 6 million. But what about 1 in 10 raised to the 12th power? That's like 1 in a trillion. 12 zeros on the end. But what if we raise that to 50? The power of 50. That would be 1 in 1 with 50 zeros. 1 in 10 to the 50th. Which is 1, and I had to put these things in there because I don't know how to pronounce it. There actually is a word for it. I looked it up. 100 quindecillion. All right. So here's some other odds. The odds of getting 5 tails or heads in a row is only 1 in 32. But getting 20, we just said, was like 1 in a million. Guessing your 3-digit locker combination. There's 125,000 different ways that could be done. So it's 1 in 125,000. Or approximately a little more than 1 in 10 to the 5. Getting hit by lightning twice in the same lifetime, all right? 1 in 10 million. Winning the Powerball lottery, 1 in 300 million. And getting 166 tails in a row. I had to fudge this one a little bit to find out what it was. I just kept flipping. No, I didn't. I just kept using a calculator until I got it. All right? 1 in 10 to the 50th power. That's pretty big. It's huge. We're going to see how you can do it. In fact, there's this guy named Emile Borel. He's actually dead now, but he was alive in my lifetime. He was a famous French mathematician that dealt with statistics a lot. And one of the things that he said, that in occurrence of any event where the chances are beyond 1 in 1 followed by 50 zeros, in other words, flipping this even coin 166 times, is an event which we can state with certainty will never happen, no matter how much time is allotted and no matter how many conceivable opportunities could exist for the event to take place. We could flip this 166 times, we won't get it. We can flip this 166 times again, and we won't get it. We can flip this 166 times again, and as long as we're not cheating, this guy says it's impossible. You can try the rest of your life and you never will get it. All right? That's what we need to know going into this first video that I want to show you. We have two videos. First one's short, second one's a little longer. We're going to try to get through both of them. So here's the first one. I better turn this up for the people at home, or they're not going to go to hear it. Oh, I need to give just a little bit of intro to this. I forgot. There was a conference back in 1966 called the WinStar Symposium, and what they did in that symposium is they got a bunch of really smart math guys, really smart physics guys, and really smart biologists together to discuss evolution. You with me? By the time the conference was done, the math guys and the physics guys told the biologists, your math doesn't work. Evolution can't, it's impossible the way you're saying that it happened. Because the odds are against it so far. This is a guy, for just a few minutes here, it's like 5 or 6 minutes long, is talking about that conference and what happened. All right.
50 years ago today, there was a remarkable meeting held at the Wistar Institute in Philadelphia that's had a tremendous influence on thinking over the past 50 years about the nature of the evolutionary process. Briefly, what happened was a group of physicists and engineers took an interest in biology. And they took an interest in particular in the basic logic of the Darwinian process. And thinking very much as engineers do, namely asking the question, will it work, right? An engineer just can't wave his hands. Either the plane flies or it doesn't. The bridge stands or it doesn't. They're very practical minded. These engineers, and that's a bit of a simplification, these are professors at places like MIT, like Murray Eden. They said, it looks like the math is not going to cooperate. You've got a search condition in the first step of natural selection where you are looking at a selection of random outcomes provided to you by mutation. What that means is that unlike an engineered system where you can bias the outcome using your intellect to aim at the target you want, in evolution, in neo-Darwinian evolution, your raw materials, so to speak, are being provided to you essentially by a roulette wheel. I'm mixing metaphors here, but the idea is you're having to make the best of a series of random outcomes. Randomness, by definition, is undirected, meaning that the process is waiting on, as it's looking to move towards a particular functional outcome, is waiting on the deliverances of a giant lottery wheel or, pick any particular random process you want. The mathematics of that, as you carry it through, raise severe challenges for getting that process as a whole, the whole of the evolutionary process, to go where you want, which is namely to build you bacterial cells or plants or animals or any complex integrated system. And what happened was these engineers got together, very, very bright guys, engineers and physicists, and they invited their friends. The faculties of places like Harvard and so forth, MIT, they went and knocked on the door, the office doors of the biologists, and they said, we think we've got a problem here, and we're going to have a symposium to talk about this and sort it out. And it was then known, the publication that came out of this was known as Mathematical Challenges to the Neo-Darwinian Interpretation of Evolution. So these critics accept that there was some evolutionary process that occurred. That wasn't at issue. What was at issue was the neo-Darwinian understanding of how this had happened. And what's remarkable about the Wistar document is you see the papers from the various authors, both pro and con, with respect to neo-Darwinism, and then transcripts of the discussions are included. And these transcripts are very lively reading. So at certain points in the wake of a talk, people are yelling at each other. You can almost see chairs being thrown. This meeting must have been incredible to attend. And I recommend to anyone who wants to take the time, find that book. Again, the title is Mathematical Challenges to the Neo-Darwinian Interpretation of Evolution, and read through it. And it's quite revealing. The puzzle that they focused on was unsolved in 1966, and it's unsolved today. And it's unsolved because of a deeper question, and that is, all parties, I think almost without exception at that meeting, all parties to the debate would have agreed that to explain any living thing, you are limited to natural processes and chance, right? So if you think about having an explanatory toolkit, you pop the lid on your toolbox and look inside. You've got natural processes, whatever they happen to be, and chance events, and that's it. No appeals to intelligence, to guidance, to teleology were allowed. All right, we'll play that game, right? But that means if the products you're looking at, if the things you wish to explain were in fact caused by intelligence, and that's what actually happened, you are not going to be able to solve your problem because your toolkit is too small. So it's a fascinating document. It was an incredible meeting, but it highlights the limits that a materialist understanding of reality places on your freedom as a scientist to say, you know what, this system that I'm looking at requires intelligence, and I need a better toolkit. This one's not going to work, right? That wasn't an option for anybody there. But you can see very clearly, especially in the papers of these physicists and engineers, they realize neo-Darwinism does not work. And I think in the intervening 5 decades, the evolutionary biology community itself has finally awakened to this. So, in November, at the Royal Society in London, a meeting has been convened that will be, I predict, very much like Wistar and its consequences, where the assembled speakers are going to say, our current theory is bust, and we need to try something else. And
So, there's just about another minute left there, but he said everything that I needed him to say. What does it mean that their toolbox isn't big enough? What is it that they would need, that the mathematicians and the physicists are saying that you would need in your toolbox in order for this to work? It's what we talked about in the first 2 classes, which a couple of you were here for, actually, several. What was it that you need? What did we talk about in the first couple of classes? We had a picture of an ugly looking guy over here, scared to death, and what did we have back on the other side of him? Yeah. We were saying that you only have 2 possibilities, only either inert matter started everything, which there was no thought, there was no intellect whatsoever, as opposed to having what in the beginning instead? What was our other option? Well, I think it's a creator, but at least it's on what? An intelligence, a mind, a functioning mind of some kind, all right? I believe that mind was God. Some other people believe it's other things. I think they're wrong. That's a different debate. We're going to get into that debate later. But the point is, either you start with no mind or you start with a mind. And the evolutionists up to this point, especially the biologists, are trying to start with no mind, no intelligence. And what they're saying is that your toolbox isn't big enough, you need a mind, or it doesn't work. Okay? The probabilities are too high without a mind. This is a quote from a guy at that conference. All right? His name was Sir Peter Medawar. He was one of the I think one of the mathematicians, but I don't remember for sure. And this is on those pages of that journal, so you can look it up if you wanted. The immediate cause of this conference is a pretty widespread sense of dissatisfaction about what has come to be thought as the acceptance of accepted evolutionary theory in the English speaking world. That is what he's calling Darwinism. Darwinian theory. Neo simply means the new Darwinian theory, which means it's been updated. So there are objections made by fellow scientists who feel that in the current theory, something is missing. These objections to current Darwinian theory are very widely held among biologists generally, and we must, on no account, I think, make light of them. The very fact that we are having this conference is evidence that we are not making light of them. And at the same time, they just had another conference. I've never looked that one up yet to find out what they are, but we might not even know the results for a while. This is kind of no, that's not right. Oh, yeah, opposite point of view of an atheist. What are the odds of life having randomly formed on Earth? The answer is close to 100%. Why would the atheist say that the Winstar thing with all these smart math and physics guys says that it's nearly impossible? The odds are figured on some of this stuff that makes what Emile Borel say makes them impossible, and yet this guy says that they're nearly 100%. Why? Well, as long as the conditions for life already exist. What are those conditions for life that he's saying already exist that we've already talked about? Symbiotic relationships, relationships between planets, a mind being formed out of chemicals and electricity. You see that they're accepting a lot of really wild things that they can't prove in order to say that the idea of life forming randomly is 100%. In other words, conditions for life already existed, the energy, the chemicals, and so on. As we know, life actually has formed on Earth. Since we already see life on Earth, then it must have happened. Since life is already on Earth, it must have happened that way. Well, that's kind of a big leap, if you ask me. All right? For life not to have formed randomly, it would have to have been inevitable just as soon as the right conditions for life existed. But there is so much involved in the right conditions, I don't know how I can say that. All right? Here's some terms that are going to come up in this second film. Now, this second film is a little longer, and we're going to watch it to its completion because I don't want to have to show it again next week. But we've already talked about the first 3, 4 integrated systems. There's a difference between microevolution, number 5, and macroevolution. Microevolution is what happens when you breed animals into a different breed of animals. So in other words, if you take a bulldog and a terrier, you get a pit bull. That happens, doesn't it? We got pit bulls, so it must happen. Macroevolution, on the other hand, is the one we have in question. It is the one where a cow changes to a whale, or a monkey into a man. In other words, from one species into another. And he's going to use this term, so we need to know what it is. Ex post factor is something that he's got in there, something that happens after the fact. Coevolution will come up, that's important. And then coded information We're gonna talk about that quite a bit next week, so this is gonna spill over, it's gonna be a 2-week thing. So, here's this one, and pay close attention, because this is probably all we got time for.
The purpose of this video is to expand on a recent video that I created on the mathematical impossibilities to evolution. Now, I showed this video to several university professors, including a professor of biology and a professor of mathematics. And both these professors suggested that I condense my thoughts into an article and submit it to a journal for peer review. So I decided to take their advice. I wrote an article, I submitted it to the Journal of Applied Mathematics and Physics, and it was peer-reviewed and accepted for publication. It should come out in late November of this year. And in this presentation, I'm going to outline these basic 4 premises of this paper, which I think are going to be fairly easy for everyone to understand. But before I get into the substance of this video, I need to dispel a very common argument that's used to attempt to refute probability challenges to evolution. Many who challenge evolution argue that you cannot apply mathematical probability to historical events. In other words, you can't look at an existing reality and determine after the fact or ex post facto whether or not it came about as a result of chance. Now, a common example that's used is the shuffling of a deck of cards. Every time a deck of 52 cards is shuffled, the sequence that results has an ex post facto probability that is extremely low. In other words, very improbable events happen every day. It's thus argued that random mutations can result routinely in very improbable nucleotide sequences and hence can explain the evolution of complexities. Now, this is a very common error of applied mathematical logic. It's mathematically certain that a shuffle of a deck of cards would result in an unordered sequence. If anyone shuffled a deck of cards with all the spades, diamonds, hearts, and clubs grouped together in order, you could conclude after the fact that the deck wasn't adequately shuffled. Now, ex post facto probability arguments are routinely employed in courts of law, and life and death decisions are made based on those improbabilities. For example, let's consider Jack Whiting, who's accused of pushing his wife off a cliff to her death. Now, Jack says it was an accident, but the prosecution argues that there were only 100 such accidental falls per year in the U.S. And since there are 68 million married women, this means that Jack had only a 1 chance out of 680,000 that this would have been an accident. Now, if this was the only evidence presented, no jury would be convinced that Jack was guilty. Jack might have been just as unlucky as the other 99 husbands in the country who lost their wives to falling off cliffs. So in this case, ex post facto probability is a fallacious argument because only one event is considered. Now let's suppose that the prosecution came forward with documentation that 2 of Jack's former wives also died from falling off cliffs over the past 10 years. Any jury member would be very suspicious because no one could be that unlucky. So in this case, ex post facto probability arguments can be applied to determine if multiple separate events can be ascribed to chance. In this case, the probability of 3 events of this type to occur in one family in 10 years is about 1 chance in 2.6 quadrillion. So a random shuffle of a deck can result in any of trillions of possible sequences. However, 3 separate shuffles can't result in the same sequence 3 times. Now let's consider another example. Suppose someone flipped a coin 100 times and achieved 60% heads. Is that possible? The ex post facto probability of those being random fair tosses is 1 chance in 37. So it's possible the coin was fair, but unlikely. But now suppose someone claimed to get 6,000 heads out of 10,000 tosses. That is impossible with a fair coin because the ex post facto probability is around 10 to the minus 90th. These calculations illustrate an important probability principle. The greater the number of trials, the more certain the outcome will be constrained to a random result. And this principle is mathematically described by the central limits theorem. Now, in my paper, 4 mathematical challenges to evolution are presented, and I'll address each of these. And I want to emphasize that each one of these challenges independently disproves the theory of evolution. So for those of you who might believe in evolution, if you think I'm wrong, you need to refute each and every one of these challenges. If any one of these 4 challenges is valid, evolution is destroyed. I presented these challenges to several PhD level mathematicians and biologists who believe in evolution, and to date, no one has refuted any of these 4 claims. The first challenge: all proposed pathways of macroevolution require the appearance of a directional pattern of mutations, and that pattern preferentially had to affect specific genes. For example, in the proposed evolution of the eye, a series of changes which creates a gradually increasing curvature of the retina is envisioned. Now, in Nilsson and Pelder's 1994 article, it's claimed that the vertebrate eye could have easily evolved from a flat, light-sensitive spot in 364,000 years. All they consider is that natural selection could favor an incrementally increasing curvature of the retina in 1,829 steps. They didn't even consider the odds of those 1,829 steps randomly appearing in a population. So here's the likelihood of those mutations appearing in a population. And I've made some reasonable assumptions, and I've employed the binomial distribution.
Understand this formula.
The odds of these steps appearing in a population is about 1 chance in 10 to the 1,423rd power.
See how huge that is?
Now, even though the numbers in this calculation might be disputed, it is clear that the probability of such a pattern of mutations appearing in a finite population over a limited number of generations can be rounded off to 0. Again, think about achieving 60% heads with 10,000 coin tosses. With mathematical certainty, random mutations will not deviate from a predictable random outcome to preferentially affect specific genes. Virtually every proposed pathway of macroevolution requires that specific genes be affected more than other genes. In other words, the mutations that drive evolutionary pathways could not have been random. Now, the next challenge I'm going to talk about is the widespread phenomenon of molecular convergence. This refers to similar DNA sequences of different species that can't be attributed to a common ancestor. For example, the genes that encode for the protein prestin, which is essential in echolocation, are similar in dolphins and bats. The 3 auditory genes of echolocation are composed of about 20,000 specific nucleotide bases, and these genes are believed to have evolved separately in at least 3 independent lineages. Now, the existence of these convergences can't be attributed to selection of random mutations. It's mathematically certain that a random process can't result in identical outcomes if the number of possible outcomes is too great. Now, this principle forms the basis of cybersecurity and protects billions of dollars from theft. The reason someone can't steal money from your bank account is because it's too unlikely that he'll correctly guess encrypted passwords. And this identical principle is also used in courts of law to determine if a suspect's DNA links him or her to a crime scene. The only biologic reason why a person's DNA can't match the DNA of someone else is the mathematical improbability that it'll match. And that calculated improbability is used as a gold standard to prove guilt or innocence. Now, how does this relate to convergence? Some might say, but what about natural selection? Natural selection can't act on a mutation that doesn't appear in the population. In considering the origin of molecular convergences, the creation of just 100 identical nucleotide sequences can occur in specific genes in different lineages by chance. And this is because the number of combinatorial possibilities of 100 nucleotide sequences is about 10 to the 60th, or about the number of elemental particles in the solar system. A similar comparison can be made by determining if a student has plagiarized an essay written by someone else. If the text is sufficiently similar, he's guilty. And this judgment is determined by the extreme ex post facto improbability that his words will coincidentally match the words of someone else. Now, this principle is universally understood and accepted without doing any mathematical calculations. The next mathematical challenge is the coevolution of complex integrated parts. Now, this refers to the creation of multiple independent parts that results in functionally integrated systems. Let's consider Jack Whiting, who was accused of murder in the previous example. The prosecution discovered that his previous 2 wives had also fallen off cliffs. So the evidence against Jack mounts. Now suppose that the prosecution produced evidence that Jack took out a large life insurance policy on the wife 2 weeks before she died. And another witness came forward and testified that Jack's wife was afraid of heights and would never have gone near the edge of a cliff. These facts would have functionally integrated meaning to the case and would be used as further evidence that Jack's guilty. So with each line of corroborating circumstantial evidence presented, the probability that all of these integrated factors can be ascribed to chance diminishes. So in this manner, circumstantial evidence is used to convict or exonerate suspects by ex post facto probability arguments. Now, complex integrated parts are ubiquitous in biologic systems. The evolution of the eye includes much more than a curved retina. A system of integrated parts includes an iris that reacts to light, complex eye fluids, biochemical systems of vision, an optic nerve that needs to incrementally increase in size, a transparent lens with a specific microanatomy, occipital lobes of the brain to translate binary code into 3D images, a transparent cornea, tear glands and ducts, muscles to move the eye, and other anatomic endowments. Now, this obstacle is often dismissed because it's argued that the eye can function with very few of these integrated parts. But this begs the question, how could random mutations affect specific genes to result in a functionally integrated outcome? In the previous calculation of eye evolution, the probability would need to include not just the likelihood of the origin of an increasingly curved retina, but of all functionally integrated parts. So if just 10 functionally integrated components of vision are considered, this could result in a calculated probability on the order of 10 to the minus 14,000th power. Now, the next challenge is the nature of coded information.
We're going to talk about coded information next week, so I'm not going to have him do that. I'm going to sum up with a couple of things real quick, if you don't mind. So, one of the main points I wanted to get out of that was the idea of the co-evolution of complex integrated parts. And he used the idea that if the guy's wife only fell off the cliff, there's a possibility that she only fell off the cliff. But if you start adding or multiplying the probabilities that this wife, that wife, and a third wife all did, that becomes huge. And then, at the same time, if you would say that he took out a life insurance policy and he did this and he did this, that kind of starts pointing towards the impossibility that that didn't happen by accident. And the same thing is true with evolution. We looked at the eye in the very first lesson that we did. What they did a study on, he's saying, is that they studied the likelihood of the eye changing its curvature. But what else is involved in an eye? Just the curvature? In other words, you have a flat, light-sensitive material and over time it just kind of curves? Or do you have all kinds of other parts of the eye that are in there that are just as important? They all have to happen simultaneously. Therefore, the odds go up, and he says it's not even, like I said at the beginning, 1 in 260 some, 10 to the 260 some power. He's got like to the 14,000th power. In other words, it was way beyond the possibility of it happening by accident. Way beyond it. You have to multiply all those. Those are what he means by coevolution of complex integrated parts. When an evolutionist tells you that this could happen, what he's saying is, yeah, that one event could happen, but that one event is not the only thing that had to have happened. What kinds of things have we had so far that we've talked about? And this is only a minor part of it. We talked about the chances of the eye could form gradually. We talked about the chances of inert matter becoming living through spontaneous generation. We talked about the chances of mindless matter becoming a mind through chemistry and electricity. We talked about the chances of symbiotic relationships forming gradually. And we talked about the chances of interrelationships between the planets making it suitable for life on Earth. You can't just say that, well, this part of the eye could form by accident. You have to take all parts of the eye and all these other things and probably thousands and thousands and thousands, if not millions of other things, and say all of those things had to happen. What's the probability of that? You see how enormous that gets? And their argument, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not a scientist. I've studied some science. I'm a math guy. I have a math degree. But even if I didn't, it seems to me that their argument becomes silly at some point or another, and it's more of a religion than it is science.
Yes.
Okay? The chances of irreducible complexity found in microscopic machines, and there's like more than the ones that we talked about. We talked about like 2 or 3 of them, and that was it. With the advent of each new highly unlikely random event, in other words, all the events that we just mentioned on the previous screen, plus a whole bunch of other ones that we haven't even gotten into, with the advent of each new highly unlikely random events, the odds for the existence of our universe and probability of life happening by chance diminishes astronomically. And the greater the likelihood it is that a mind was involved in this process. That's kind of what I'm trying to get you to see. We still got a lot of stuff to talk about, but this is kind of a summation of what we've talked about up to this point. Next week, we're going to talk about coded information. I'll talk a little bit about how a computer works, all right, and how that translates into the code that's inside your body through the DNA and how it works, and how it's impossible for that to happen without a mind. All right, that's what next week's going to be about. Any questions? I know this video here was a little bit up here. I understand that. But if you can get those 2 things I discussed afterwards out of it, that's all I ask. Okay?